Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Today, I would like to talk about break-even and payback analysis. The learning outcome for this will be, first of all, to determine the break-even point for one parameter. Secondly, to analyze the break-even point of a parameter and use it to select between two alternatives and determine the payback period of a project at R equals to 0%. So what is break-even point? It is a value of a parameter that makes two elements equal. It is determined as a parameter or variable that an amount of revenue, cost, supply, demand, etc. for one project or between two alternatives. For one project, it is called the break-even point and identified as QBE. It is determined using non-linear and linear math relations for revenue and cost. For between two alternatives, it is done by determining one parameters, whether it is P, A, F, I, or N, with other constant. So the solution for this is by using three methods: direct solution of relations, trial and error, or using the spreadsheet functions or tool. So cost revenue for one project is determined by these variables or these terminologies. The Q, denoted as Q, is an amount of variable in question: units of a year, hours of a month, and it's called the break-even value, QBE. The fixed cost, denotes as FC, is cost not directly dependent on variable. For example, the cost of buildings, fixed overhead, insurance, minimum workforce cost. Hence, the variable cost, denoted as VC, is the cost that change with parameters such as production level and workforce size. These are labor, material, and marketing costs. Variable cost per unit is denoted as V. Total cost, denotes as TC, is the sum of fixed and variable costs written as TC equivalent to FC plus VC. So it is total sum of fixed costs and variable costs. Revenue, denotes as R, is an amount dependent on quantity sold, and it is denoted revenue per unit is the R, small capital. Profit P, on the other hand, is the amount of revenue remaining after cost. Thus, P equivalent to R minus DC equivalent to R minus FC plus VC. So we move on. So this is the graph for linear and non-linear revenue cost relations. So where you can see in this first graph, Q against revenue. Okay, the first relationship is the increasing revenue, okay, number one. The second relationship is the decreasing revenue. Okay, you can see the pattern is going downwards. Number one is going upwards. So for the linear cost relationship, it looks like this, and the non-linear, it looks like this. So break-even for linear R and TC, so solve for QBE, you can see that in this diagram, the variable cost V is lowered and QBE decreases, it moves to the left. Alright, and these are the equations for you to determine mathematically the value of break even. Okay, so this is example for you to use calculation to calculate for QBE. Another example and more. You can do it on your own for your understanding. So now we move on to break even between two alternatives. To determine the value of common variable between two alternatives, do the following. First, define the common variable. Second, develop PW, AW, or FW relations as function of common variable for each alternative. Number 3, equate the relations and then solve for variable. Then you find the break-even values. Okay, for value below break-even, which is here, okay, select for higher variable costs. So for above break-even values, select for lower variable costs. Okay, this is the tips for you to choose when you have two alternatives. Okay, so here's the example and the solution for you to look on later. Okay, more examples here. We have lots of examples for you to test your understanding. So now we move on to payback period analysis. The payback period is an estimated time, or NP denotes as NP, for cash inflows to recover an initial investment, P plus a stated return of return, which is the interest rate. There are two types of payback analysis, no return or discounted payback. So what is no return? No return payback means the rate of return is 0. Okay, discounted payback considers time value of money where I is bigger than 0%. Note, only no return payback cover in this syllabus. So as a caution, payback period analysis is a good initial screening tool rather than the primary method to justify a project or select an alternatives. Okay. So the formula for you to choose is to calculate for NP is finding the net cash flow, denotes as NCF for the period T. So these are the equation number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, based on conditions. Okay, for equation number 1 is where I equals to 0%, NCF T varies annually. For equation 2, I equals to 0%, the NCF has uniform value annually. For discounted I bigger than 0, the NCF varies annually. And secondly, the NCF value uniform annually. Okay, these two are for I for bigger than 0%. Okay, points to remember about payback analysis. No return payback neglects time value of money, so no return is expected for the investment made. No cash flows after the payback period are considered in the analysis. Return may be higher if these cash flows are expected to be positive. The approach of payback analysis is different from PW, AW, ROR, and P of C analysis. A different alternative may be selected using payback. And rely on payback as supplemental tool. And then use PW or AW at the MARR for a reliable decision. So whatever decision you make, please either use PW or AW. Payback is just a tool. And lastly, discounted payback R equals to 0% gives a good sense of the risk involved. whether the investment is high risk or low risk. So we have examples over here for you to look on. And we come to the end of the lecture. The summary of important points for this chapter. First, the break-even amount is a point of indifference to accept or reject a project. Secondly, one project break-even except if quantity is bigger than QBE. Thirdly, two alternative break-even. If level bigger than break-even, select lower variable cost alternative, smaller slope. Number 4, payback estimates time to recover investment. Return can be I equals to 0% or I bigger than 0%. Number 5, use payback as supplemental to PW or other analysis because NP neglects cash flows after payback. And if I equals to 0%, it neglects time value of money. And last but not least, payback is useful to sense the economic risk in a project. Therefore, we've come to the end of our engineering economics. Please do your tutorials, which I will upload later. And all the best to you. Ciao. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi